I'm Sam Hales here with premiere on the set of The Chosen in Texas, and season 3 is coming up. This is, of course, the first ever multi-season portrayal of the life of Jesus. I'm delighted to say I'm here with the writers of The Chosen. Thank you so much for joining us here at premiere, Ryan and Tyler. It's wonderful to have you on. And where to begin? Well, we're on to season 3. So we've had 2 seasons already. What can we expect coming up in season 3 of The Chosen?
Season 3. We're so excited to share it with you, Sam. Season 3, let's say there's a theme. The theme is going to be come unto me. Jesus is going to move into the area of sharing his message with Gentiles. There's a motif that runs through the season that I don't want to spoil for you, but we're excited for people to sort of latch on to. I think this season also, in terms of the experience of our surrogate eyeballs, the people who met him, is some of the sheen of having been called wears off. And we try to explore what life is like at ground level for the life of ministry that's ahead.
And you're obviously using the Bible as your primary source, but you're adding in extra storylines, sort of narratives, characters, all sorts of things going on. Can you just explain a little bit how that process works? Because as fans of the show know, there's nothing that contradicts Scripture, but there is extra material. So how does that work in terms of starting with the Bible and then trying to fill in some of the blanks?
Well, with any given character, we just take everything that they have said or done that's recorded in the gospel. So it's like a set of facts about a person. Like we know that Simon was called after a night of fishing and catching nothing. We know that later on he will be called the Rock. We know later on he will deny knowing Jesus. We know things about his own epistle later in the. So someone like that, we have tons of information from that we can pull lots of facts and start to construct a character. Other characters like Simon the Zealot is mentioned only once. So we have no data. But there's a key word there, which is zealot. There's tons of research on who the zealots were as the fourth philosophy of Jewish thought during the time. So it involves looking at both the Bible and at history sometimes, and doing our best. And also just, you mentioned like what the process is. The process often involves just asking, is what they're saying, does it, as you say, it doesn't contradict. Is it believable based on everything we know about the time period, the culture? Does it run afoul of any of that? And as long as that's a no, then it's free game. Yeah. It's
that kind of, if I can call it, the plausibility factor that is so special about the show. And I think you've been very brave in reimagining things that other writers of other TV shows about Jesus haven't dared to do. So has that been a tension in terms of you are pushing the boundaries creatively, aren't you?
We are, and you know we have looked for traditions of folks having done that. Dorothy Sayers has written lengthy volumes about her experience bringing these stories into a dramatic space. And you know what Tyler is saying is that, because of our approach, because of the concept of the show, taking a look at Jesus' life through the eyes of people who met him, who were humans, we don't feel it's as daring. We feel like that concept wraps us in bubble wrap. We get to go into that place in a little more protected place. We also have, as Tyler alluded, we have a council of people who look at our work, who alert us to anything that we may have come in with a blind spot about.
Can you give us an example of how that works, of something you've written where actually the panel have said, you can't quite do that?
In season 1, we had a storyline for Simon that involved him fishing on Shabbat. This was something that we spoke at length with our Messianic rabbi about. We needed, if we were going to portray Simon in that light, who was a faithful Jew, who was, by all accounts, somebody who practiced the letter of the law, we needed to come in a really safe space. So we had to portray, as we believe, we set up appropriately. Simon was in mortal danger. And so this was an act that is, in fact, permissible. But there was so much pushback from our rabbis, and that says he's doing his job. Mm-hmm. And so we, that's just one example. There have been a handful throughout the the show's season, and we're writing season 4 now. So
So there's real dialogue and debate, and obviously a lot of thinking before
Yes.
things go in. Of course, there will always be, with anything creative, there'll be criticism and commentary. How do you cope with that and deal with that? Are you trying to just do your job and not worry about what people think, or is there areas where you think, oh, actually, if we're getting a lot of feedback on that, maybe we need to rethink it? I'm talking about the audience here. When people actually see the work, how does that affect you? Do you go there? Do you read what people are writing?
We're very grateful for the audience. We're grateful for the feedback that we do get, but it's too late.
Yes.
As he said, we're writing season 4 right now while season 3 is filming. We work a year ahead, and as he mentioned, we have people that are speaking into the process to be careful. And yeah, we do hear things, but we hear, you as a writer yourself, you hear both like resounding praise and a lot of criticism, and you can't really take either one too seriously. If we took it personally every time someone had a different opinion, we could never get out of bed in the morning. But also, if we believed all the hype, we would have really big heads. So we just try to tune all that out and focus on the work.
So we know we've got a lot of seasons to go yet, and of course, spoiler alert, we know what happens to Jesus in the end with the crucifixion and resurrection. But there's a lot of material after that in terms of what happens in Scripture after the resurrection. Are you starting to think about that, spin-off, future projects? Because I think a lot of people already, I know we're only at season 3, but there's already people saying, hey, we want more from The Chosen. We don't just want, 7 seasons, we want to go beyond that. Are you starting to think about that at all?
I mean, yes, because we come in from television backgrounds, and we're looking at the wider industry. But we also have to be super cautious. Yes, we're working on season 4, but we're getting calls today about stuff that's filming out there. So we can't get too far ahead of ourselves. Every day we have to we keep it as small as possible. It's a scene, we're moving characters X, Y, and Z through conflict B, and how does that fit into our larger storyline? So we are, and it's valuable to the extent that we know what journey we have to take them on. So if we know we get to tell that story, if our show is going to project out that far, or maybe Chosen Universe will project out that far, then maybe it's worthwhile introducing some issue that then has to be overcome. If we're never going to explore that space, then why put the question on the table? So it's valuable to that degree today, and I think largely we're just trying to keep it as small as possible.
And tell me a bit about your own backgrounds, and particularly how this works when you're looking at the history, and as writers, are you drawing on your own expertise or knowledge of the time? You going to Israel and doing archaeological tours. How does all of that sort of historical background fit into what you do in your job?
You knew we went on an archaeology tour.
He's done his research.
You've done your research. So.
Well, I studied Old Testament and Hebrew for my undergraduate, so some might say, "Oh, you've studied the wrong Testament," but it has come in handy for this.
Definitely relates.
Yeah, it relates, and we sneak little pieces of the Old Testament in there. So I do have that biblical studies background, and then yes, we have toured Israel extensively, particularly in the north, in the Upper Galilee, where most of our story takes place. So that really helps. But then, of course, we have people who help us with research, Gabrielle and Maisha, because there's too much just for any one person to do all the research themselves. So we're incredibly well supported.
As I say, this is the first time, really, there's been a multi-season portrayal of the life of Jesus, which even as I say that, I think, why is that? Why has no one attempted this before?
I think this concept is unique. It is a show through the eyes of the people who encountered Jesus. And I think anybody who endeavors to tell this story, there is, we're coming from a faith perspective. And people who have tried to come from a faith perspective then find themselves bound by their faithfulness to the material. This concept allows us to do both, and I think it was the genius of the proof of concept pilot that Tyler and Dallas wrote. And when I came into it and looked at it as a narrative to dig into, it felt like something that where the characters didn't have to be plot bots. They weren't just characters that, we know they go from A to B, and so let's take them there. It was a place where we allowed them to have free will, agency. We got to introduce the context of their lives, so their choices became inherently dramatic. And I think that's one way then we get to explore them for as long as we do. We get to love them, and we hope that the audience is invested in them over the course of that time. If you can't, if you don't find that fissure, the material that's there, which is not always chronological, which is not always narratively written or shared in its perfect form, doesn't allow you to go to that space. So it becomes episodic as opposed to serial.
Yeah, it's certainly a unique production, and it's been great to talk to you both about the behind-the-scenes writing that goes into it. Ryan and Tyler, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Sam.